Hello and welcome to my channel, From Profession to Passion, with me, Vicky Mittman. The purpose of this channel is to inform and inspire professionals to live their careers on their terms. Whilst the traditional route in many professions may work well for some, it isn't for everyone, and there are different ways of doing things. On this channel, I'll be sharing my own story of how I combined my profession in law with my passion for coaching and mentoring, and I'll be interviewing other professionals who've developed their own side hustles, changed career directions altogether, or found some other way to involve their passions in their professional lives. I am very excited today to be joined by Irene Broomfield, who I know through the coaching space. Irene is a career coach now, but that's not where it all started for you, Irene, is it? So I'd love for you to tell us a bit more about your story, if you're happy to share.
Absolutely. So, well, my story is one of those very traditional ones that really, I think that the on sort of trend term at the moment is recollections may vary, but from my school days, I just trundled through school, and there was a general expectation at each stage as I sort of went up the academic ladder that you just keep going. And I ended up being very good at geography, and off I went to Exeter University to commence a geography degree, having put no thought into a career whatsoever. So I did my first term at Exeter University, and having spent far too much time measuring a wetted perimeter, ended up really poorly with pneumonia and terribly unwell. And it was decided between the university and myself that really the best thing to do would be to go home and get better and come back the following year. And I was only 17 when I arrived at university, so there was a bit of capacity in terms of age for a bit of flexibility there. And I went home and I got better, and then I spent the rest of that year working, and thought, what on earth am I doing a geography degree for? I'm much more interested in all of my friends' degrees who are doing psychology. So I reapplied back to Exeter University, got accepted to do a geography degree, and thought I would continue up and become a psychologist. I then, I did some work shadowing some psychologists, and concluded that this wasn't going to be for me, because the emotional detachment part I discovered isn't something I was amazing at which point I can remember my poor father and mother looking terribly concerned about what on earth was I going to do for a career. And my next summer job was in an HR department. And I thought I had a brilliant summer. I spent 3 months working in this HR department, and thought, this doesn't seem too bad. I'm really quite enjoying myself. And so I applied to do a master's in HR. And from that point onwards, I was successful in applying to a graduate HR scheme in the City of London at Prudential. And that was the beginning of my HR career, which just kept going. Venture capitalists, investment banks. I worked at Mars, and then I had my first son. And it was only really after that, when I had that career break, and I then went back to work in a part-time HR role at Hampshire Constabulary. And I remember just this lightning bolt moment when I'd gone out to do a night shift with one of the police shifts in one of the city centres. And I came back from that, and I just thought, oh my goodness, your jobs just all seem far more purposeful than mine. There seems a purpose to your job. And I think when I'd started in HR, there was a lot more money available within organisations. So my job at the beginning was split very much between helping people and doing the disciplinary type sort of HR work. But as my career went on, it seemed to be more and more focused on closing offices, making headcount, reductions. And to say I wasn't popular would probably be an understatement. And I remember just really thinking, I want to do more to help people. This isn't feeling like it's enough for me. The job had changed enormously. I had changed. And so the first inkling I got that that I was going to look to do something different was I took myself off to do a 9-month reflexology course. Not because I had any particular interest in becoming a reflexologist whatsoever. It was just an opportunity presented itself, and I thought, I'm going to go do something completely different. And what I loved about that was the fact that I was making people feel good. People were thanking me for making them feel, you know, relaxed, for making a difference. I think that for me was the key. I was making a difference, and which was a real sort of like difference, because my day job felt like I constantly had people telling me that I'd ruined their life, or, you know, slashing my tires when I came out of work because I'd made somebody redundant. And it was just a very, very different environment. And I left there to go work at the NHS for the next 5 or 6 years. And while I loved the job, I loved the environment, you know, the people and all of that type of thing, it became even more obvious to me of how worthless I felt in my particular job. Because when you're stood in A&E trying to have a conversation with people about HR issues and somebody's saving somebody's life, I was a bit like, oh my goodness, I still feel like this isn't enough. I'm not adding enough value for me. And so I then had my second son, and I commenced a 10-year career break at this point in time, which was then going to bring about quite a big challenge, because I knew I wanted to go back to work, but I also knew I didn't want to go back to the HR role that I had. Yeah. So I felt really stuck at that point in time, because at that point it was really feeling quite monumentally big, the whole challenge of how I got myself back to work. Because I think over that period of time you start to sort of almost lose a bit of who you are. And I was saying to people, I think I've lost me a bit. Well, actually, I think I'd lost me quite a lot. And also you start to doubt the skills that you've got. And although that I'd sort of been dipping my toe in along the way, helping out, you know, on interviewing things and different bits and pieces, it still felt like this was going to be an enormous challenge, moving back into work again. And then I started working with a coach, and I remember them saying to me, what would you do if there was just no objection whatsoever, what would you want to do? And at that point I said I've always wanted to be a coach, but there'd been a million reasons I'd put into place. I'd created reasons, I'd given everybody reasons as to why this was going to be impossible. The courses were going to be in London, or everything was going to be too far. I had so many reasons to explain why I was stuck, but I wasn't looking for the ways that actually I could unstick myself, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So the pandemic brought about a fantastic opportunity that all the courses moved online. It gave me a chance to really sort of like say there are no more excuses now. You can absolutely do what you've always wanted to do. And it was at that point that I retrained to become a career coach. And to start off with, I was thinking, I was very resistant at this point in time to think, oh, do I really want to sort of like focus on the career side of things? Do I want to get away from that side of things? But I think more and more I realised that actually the part of the career work and the part of the HR that I absolutely loved was always helping people to work out what was the right career for them, and what was the right path, or if something wasn't working, what could work, rather than people just constantly resigning and leaving because they felt unhappy, trying to understand more why they were unhappy and what other options there were. So I think this has been a really nice space that I found to work in, which has really sort of made me feel more excited and more alive about work than I have in a very, very long time. But I think it's so easy when you're on those career journeys, particularly long career journeys, to start to feel, well, I trained in this, everything I've done has been in this area, and it starts to feel quite big, as if you can't walk away from it. And you start to feel that you'd be letting everybody down. And I think I went through all of those thoughts before I really spent time getting to know myself again, because who I was in my 40s when I started this career sort of transition really was very, very different from that 18-year-old that embarked on a psychology degree, or the 21-year-old that started a master's in HR and then just kept going. And so I think it's just, the pandemic for me was just that perfect opportunity to pause. And I've really noticed that people don't have, unless you make time to pause yourself, we're not very good at pausing to check in on how we're feeling about our careers.
I think that's true, and as you picked up on earlier, and it's something I hear a lot about, not just in this video series, but from clients that I've coached, is that idea that you sort of get onto a certain track or onto a certain ladder, and that's where you're really, like, everything you do is about that. So you become even more and more qualified in that area, more experienced, more resilient in that area. And the more you do that, the less chance there is of just walking away from it, because it feels like this much bigger thing. And certainly, I mean, I felt that way in law. And law is one of those professions you have to be qualified. You have to have been to law school, done your further training and your additional qualifications to actually be a practicing solicitor in my case. And then, everything's about, now that you've been taken on as a qualified solicitor, an NQ, then it's, when do I become an associate? When do I become a senior associate? When do I become a partner? And it's what most lawyers purportedly want to do. That's when you make a associate or a partner, that's when you've been successful as a lawyer. But actually, for me, I remember my dad asking me, so what's the game plan? Do you want to be a partner in a law firm? And I just said no. That wasn't what I wanted at all. And I was very clear that I still wanted to be a lawyer, but that wasn't the end goal for me. I just felt so disconnected to the place where I was. And I felt like some of me was being pushed or pulled in that direction, and the rest of me was being quite resistant to it. And I hear that sort of internal struggle, but it's hard when you can't conceptualize what's keeping you stuck or what's making that struggle real. So that's something that you probably come across. But I was really interested when you talked about, how you got into HR and how then that sort of role changed a little bit whilst you were in it. In some ways, it was a confluence of events, wasn't it? It was the fact that your HR career was focusing more on the less lovely sides of HR, the less supportive and transformational sides, more of the disciplinary side. Plus having some time off with your second son, and then also the pandemic, it felt like there are a few aspects that came together in a bit of a staggered way to allow you that space to think, what is it I really want to do?
Absolutely. And I find it so interesting because I think in so many different aspects of women's lives, people will talk about how your dress style has changed as you get older, or people will talk about how, your taste in food or something might have changed as you get older. But there's so little in terms of actual conversations out there about the fact that actually your taste in job might have changed, and it might have changed quite dramatically. And to me, it just seems so bizarre about, that there's social media will be covered about, what hairstyles you should have once you're over 40, or what clothes styles you should wear. But when people suddenly turn around and say, well, actually, I'm thinking of, I'd like to do something different, almost as a society, people are still quite shocked that suddenly people would want to do something different, that they don't want to stay in this, like you say, this route that they've been carving out. Whereas I think it has really, I don't know how you feel, but for me, it has completely re-energized me in terms of how I feel about my work, my job, my love of learning. It has rekindled all of the things that I loved when I was, younger, and has given me this fantastic opportunity to meet new people and just spend more time really, doing a job that I absolutely love doing. And I would say to anybody, as you're getting older, to take those pauses along the way and just sort of almost think, am I on the right route? You don't have to stay on that motorway that's going full speed ahead. Sometimes, that feels like, you're almost on that outside lane, and how could you ever get off? but actually sometimes if you get off and you find that more scenic route, that it you see a whole different world out there, and opportunities that you would have passed by if you'd have
Yes, if you'd have
stayed
stayed on the motorway, yeah.
on the motorway.
But
Yeah.
actually, as well, the motorway's taken you perhaps further along than you would have gone had you only been on the scenic route and never figured that out. So I often talk to my sort of professional clients who have been professionals for 10, 12, 15 years and say, but I've just been doing this so long, what else can I do? And we start looking at all of the skills aside from the technical, say, legal skills or the technical medical skills that someone might have. What about all the other skills they've learned along the way? And they realise that almost all of those skills, and indeed some of the more technical skills, are transferable to different places. And people,
Absolutely.
I remember certainly it was a bit of a buzzword when I was at law school, applying for jobs, focus on your transferable skills. It's not just about, whether you know the law, because all lawyers will know the law, but it's whether you can communicate effectively with lots of different people, whether you can, actively listen and ask, very important questions and more deep probing questions to get the full story. Those are legal skills in terms of interviewing clients and taking witness statements, things like that. But they're also skills that I use in coaching. And they're really valuable for that. So I think one of the first things
Yeah.
I do when people say, oh, I've been stuck for so long on this path, there's no way off it, and I can't possibly retrain now, is helping someone see actually all of the skills they've got because they've been in a career for so long. Actually, those skills are really strong. They're experienced in lots of different ways, and that all of that skill set will come with them. It's not like they'll just leave that luggage somewhere and head off on a different flight without any of the
Yeah.
skills they've had so far. They'll take it with them, but they might use it differently. They might deploy it differently, which I find really fascinating.
Absolutely. And I would say the same for like being on a career break, because I was almost apologizing to people for the fact that I have got 2 career breaks on my CV, and it's like, oh, well, I've just been a mum, or I've just done this. You have to sit there and really sort of think, no, actually, I really grew as a person during that period of time, and I did so many different things during that period, and so it isn't a write-off. And I think I speak to lots of people that are like, well, how can I find my way back to work or anything like that? And you absolutely can. It's just like you're saying, there's so many transferable skills out there.
Yeah.
And I think it's, whether it's a passion for that new career, or one that you're combining with your family, which I would certainly say is my 2 passions that I have managed to combine, and were really important to me to have, the ability to work, and combine those 2 areas. But I think it's just identifying what it is that's really important to you.
Mm. And actually, that may well have answered my next question. But I was going to say, what advice would you give someone if they were sitting there at their desk in their profession that has been supportive for them, but they're just feeling stuck or dissatisfied or unfulfilled? What advice would you give them?
I think for me, something that I talk a lot about is the fact that there is no one right choice of a career. I think at times it can feel like that you've carved out this one perfect career, and that you were made for it, and that's where you have to stay. But I firmly believe there is no one right career for anybody. There's only that one right career for you. And in terms of the only right choice really is the one that you want to make for yourself, but that choice might change along the way.
And
And
it's
I
okay
think,
that it does, right?
and that is completely okay. And I think even more than okay, I think for the best piece of advice I could give to somebody is try something out.
Mm.
Something doesn't have to feel like it's forever. I feel really passionately about like almost like grown up work experience. So it's like, go and have a go at something, go and try something, go and see how it feels. And that will tell you more than anything else, in terms of to see how how it feels to you, and whether it's right. And it's I think as we're getting older, the fantastic thing is the fact that you've got more time, there's more phases within your life. And
Mm.
it could be that there's lots of different jobs and careers that will be right for you along the way.
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant advice, really spot on. And it's so lovely to talk with you and to hear about your story, because I think whenever I've done these video series, interviews, people have said to me afterwards, oh, I really liked what they said because I felt that way, or I felt, coming back from a longer maternity leave, or from, just being a mum for a while, like I said, just being most important jobs, to coming back into the workplace, it does sort of it sort of sits strangely with your skill set, with your confidence, with your career path, but actually you've got so much more to bring with you. So it's lovely to hear your story, and I hope other people watching will be inspired by that. So thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Well, I mean, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, Irene, I will link obviously your LinkedIn profile to this as well, but is there any other way that they can reach you on social media or via a website?
Yes, I can be reached at my website, which is www.simbacoaching.com.
Fantastic. I'll link that down below as well. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this video, and I hope it's provided some food for thought. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe below and feel free to like or comment. I'd love to know what you think. If you're interested in hearing more about this, please join my Facebook community, From Profession to Passion with Vicky Mittman. I'll see you next time.